All right, welcome to another review of the. Wait, what the? Who the heck are you?
I'm Mr. Ring-a-Ding, I make your heart bells sing. Please don't make me laugh, just take my autograph.
Yes, hello, Hoovian. Yes, that Mr. Rigading. You have to be careful with that guy. He always creeps up on you. But yes, welcome to the review for this week's Doctor Who. As you can obviously tell, Mr. Rigading being the main focus of this story called Lux. Even though, yes, well, technically the villain, the entity that took over Mr. Rigading is Lux, a god of, I guess you could say, the god of a god of light. I guess you could say, as he was the main protagonist of this story. And of course, in this review, we're going to have a chance to go through some of the highlights of the story and just how great this story is. I mean, I definitely am expecting this story to, well, hopefully, from the overnight figures, I'm expecting the overnight figures to skyrocket quite a bit because of this story alone. Because of Shooty Gatwa's performance was exceptional, very, very exceptional performance, a very strong, powerful performance from Shooty Gatwa, and also Vanessa Seven did really powerful performance as well. I have to give credits to her as well because she really put out some performances in this story. Let's begin this review. So where we're going to start with this review is, of course, well, we kind of start in Miami in the 1952, but essentially for those who are trying to make sense of like pre-credit scene, that whole like wartime stuff on the cinema. Essentially, this was a thing that also happened in the UK. Essentially, in the UK, we have our own version, British Pathia. You can watch them on YouTube. I'll probably leave a link in the description if you want to see their films because they actually aired their films in the cinemas back in the time. Essentially, just like British Pathia, Miami has their own version where they were essentially, in the cinemas, they used to do this thing where you could watch the news in the cinema. So essentially, before anybody was able to televisions, you could essentially just go to the cinema and watch the news there as well as watching films. So they had these time slots for like films and then time slots for the news and stuff because they have like these news reels as they used to call them in the cinemas and stuff. And that's essentially what that opening was essentially the type of news reels that they used to show in like the big pictures as they call it in America, or cinemas as we call it here in the UK. Yeah, they used to do that quite a lot in the 50s, and then I believe it kind of died. I think it kind of just phased out in later years to eventually we just see movies now and as the main driving force for cinemas these days, because I mean that's usually what you see in the cinema now. You just see adverts and then eventually the big film, and then obviously of course we see the guy who's controlling the film, who I guess you could call him a caretaker in some case. He was essentially in charge of all the films. He was showing the newsreel, and then he would eventually pick up a film showing a Ring-a-Ding, Mr. Ring-a-Ding film. He wanted to show that cartoon to the audience because after watching the newsreel, let's put a cartoon up. And obviously everything seems well until the moonlight comes out, and then obviously the reflection of that light would eventually hit the screen where Mr. Ring-a-Ding would now be overtaken by this god, Lux, I guess you could say the god of light, who essentially takes control of that cartoon to make him come to life, and then he eventually would say stuff that he wouldn't say in the film, and so he became more to the audience and eventually tried to trap the audience in the film, replacing his film with the audience, which is what they did. And it was, yeah, I mean, let's say Alan Cumming as Mr. Ring-a-Ding did a really great performance as Mr. Ring-a-Ding, the way he sort of portrayed this cartoon character, and this whole like catchphrase of "oh, don't make me laugh," and obviously there was a whole purpose as to why you don't make him laugh, because if you make him laugh, he'll trap you in the film, and that's the whole gimmick there. As many of the humans found out, and obviously the Doctor found out when he encountered Mr. Ring-a-Ding. And of course, I have to mention it, as I mentioned at the top of this review, Mr. Ring-a-Ding's intro, so cartoony, isn't it? It's almost very similar to those 50 style cartoon intros you would see from the likes. I believe Disney had a couple of those back then, and obviously the BBC has had a few fair share of characters that had those type of intros. Muffet the Moon comes to mind when it comes to that. But yeah, so to be fair, it's a decent thing, isn't it, to have cartoons having these very, very somewhat catchy intros for the characters. I find it kind of funny when he does it. It's kind of weird and funny at the same time. But also, what was also really intriguing, and of course, this is becoming more and more noticeable to the Doctor now. The fact that when the Doctor asked like who was Mr. Rigaday, he actually said cut, and he stopped. Maybe the Doctor's finally realizing maybe some parts of this world is not real. Maybe that he could be in the land of fiction, which is very interesting because the last time the Doctor was in the land of fiction was in My Rubber when he was facing a different version of the Master, not the Master we know, which is the Time Lord version, a completely different version of the Master who basically controls the land of fiction. So maybe there's an opportunity there to maybe bring this character back now that they have been teasing this whole land of fiction stuff. Maybe they'll bring this character back in the modern Who, because we haven't seen this character for a very long time. So maybe there's an opportunity there for the Master of Land of Fiction to make a return into Doctor Who now that they're using this whole what's fiction and what's not now is starting to come in. And also, I think a lot of Doctor Who fans also kind of suspected the Doctor could be in a TV show because of the way that things have been playing out in recent now. And it's also this is why I find it. And also, I'm starting to believe that maybe David Tennant's 10th Doctor, it might have got us back to that point. And the reason why I say that is because, when we get to the point of the episode where the Doctor meets like the fans of his, right, from the telly screen, he gets very surprised because he asks them like, "Oh, what's your favorite Avenger of mine?" And they said, which is really weird because that was all the way back in 2007 with when David Tennant first became the Doctor, the 10th Doctor, etc. So I'm starting to believe maybe since the 10th Doctor, everything he's been doing was a TV show. Is that what I'm starting to believe? Because I'm starting to think that's what's happening here. Like, so essentially everything that basically from onwards, none of it was real. Is that what I'm starting to get? Because that would mean essentially John Simm's Master didn't really exist. Is that what I'm starting to believe? It's almost like, how do you explain John Simm's Master then if it was a TV show all along? Like, that's the part that I'm starting to wrap my head around. And then of course, and then you've got this whole Martha and Rose. I'm wondering if Martha and Rose were like a fictional character now. Were they fictional characters? I'm starting to believe maybe there's something there which is also weird because the Doctor felt Rose and Martha were real then. And then also I'm starting to wonder about Matt Smith's adventures as well as the 11th Doctor. And also half of his adventures didn't look as real as they look in certain points. So I'm starting to think maybe there was a TV show thing going on there. And then Peter Capaldi's Doctor, the 12th Doctor, I mean, it was really hard to tell. Most of it looked real, but I'm starting to think maybe some of it wasn't real, the 12th Doctor. And the same with Jodie's 13th. Starts to make you question a lot of the adventures from the past few years. What was real, what was not. It's really, it's almost like Russell's got us thinking now, like what could have been real and what couldn't have been real during this time. So, and it's also, I find it very interesting. They did that whole scene with we were told in the recent Doctor Who magazine, or previous Doctor Who, the upcoming Doctor Who magazine, they were going to feature some Doctor Who fans in the story, and I was wondering how's that going to work? But then I start to think, so essentially the Doctor was been lived in a TV show and thought that everything was real this entire time. Now I'm starting to think that maybe some of those adventures were fictional in the first place, and maybe what happens on May 24th is going to finally bring him back into the real world. That's what happens here. I'm starting to think maybe that's where we're heading now because of the way that they're handling this story and how they're handling this whole storyline. Maybe he returns to the real world on May 24th, and that's why you'll see what I mean. Because I'm starting to think, because it's because of the way that Mrs. Flood rephrases it makes me think maybe that's when he returns to the real world. Yeah, it just adds more questions than anything. And then, of course, at the end, where you would see the Doctor Who fans back alive, and they finally realize, oh, okay, now they're real. Now I'm starting to think maybe those Doctor Who fans lying after all about what was real. That some of his adventures were fiction, and the fact that they're real now, maybe the Doctor will bump into them again. Maybe he'll bump into more fans. They'll tell them, hey, this is what's happening. You need to be very wary of this. Yeah, it's just a lot of more interesting questions. What awaits the 15th Doctor, especially the whole Doctor Who fan thing. I'm starting to think maybe there's more to that now you think about it. But of course, we have to again. I might as well mention Mrs. Flood, because yes, Mrs. Flood made an appearance as soon as the Doctor disappeared. Of course, she acknowledges the TARDIS and say, "Oh, you wouldn't rather see a show? Look at that thing over there." And then she goes on to say, and make sure to capture it because it all ends on May 24th. I find that very particular, that line right there. The fact that she says, "Oh, that whole TARDIS scene there, that ends on May 24th." What does she know that we don't about May 24th? The fact that she's saying, "Oh yeah, it's all going to end." Like, what is going to end May 24th? Why are you pointing at that TARDIS and say, "Oh yeah, that's going to end"? What does she mean by that? Surely you could have elaborated a little bit further in like, the Doctor's going to end on May 24th. That would have made a little bit more sense. The fact that she said, "Oh, that's going to end." I have to wonder whether she is. I think she's definitely a part of May 24th, especially with the way she's like appearing in different disguises and saying, "Oh, I wonder if she's going to do that in every episode now." She's just going to appear and say, "Oh yeah, they'll end on May 24th. Just wait till May 24th. You won't believe your eyes." That's sort of. I'm starting to think that's what she's going to do every episode now. She's just going to keep saying that phrase. We get there, and then we start to realize what she by all of this. But yeah, it's really interesting that she appears as a disguise and pretend that she wasn't there the entire time, even though she really was. So I'm starting to. Yeah, I definitely am convinced that she is a time traveler / Time Lord in disguise, but she's refusing to admit it. Even though, because I mean, let's be honest, how the hell would she have got to Miami 1952, present day, and how she was able to get out of May 24 without any problems whatsoever? Tells me, yeah, you're a time traveler, you're a Time Lord, and you're refusing to admit. I'm expecting her to be revealed as a Time Lord, especially with the way she's been behaving, the way she's been able to assert, get to these points in time that the Doctor's been. Clearly, that's no coincidence that you're not time traveling somehow. Come on, you must be a fool to make me think you can't time travel and be able to go to the exact location that the Doctor was in before he leaves. Surely that can't be a coincidence. Sure. Carrying on with the review here. So yes, we get to the point where the Doctor gets trapped in the film, and of course by being trapped in the film, which I thought was a really cool moment of the story, does discover, he realized, because Melinda did it first, is that when you're sad, change your cartoon from 2D to 3D, and then eventually it becomes more 3D, so eventually it becomes you can become your real self in the film. But obviously they were still trapped in the film, and then they tried to get out the first time. They got into the cinema, but it was exactly right, because they have the police pointing a gun at them for something they didn't do. So they realized that, okay, maybe it's not exactly right, that maybe they were in a different, like a sort of a weird point of the cinema that they thought was real, but it wasn't. And then again, they got to the Doctor Who fans, who have been saying like they're massive fans of the show, and then they were saying like, oh, they're dying and stuff, and it was a very emotional moment. But then of course the Doctor came up with the whole concept of burning the film to get out of the film. But then of course we found out that what Lux was after was the fact that he wanted, because he realized how strong the Doctor was, he was actually using the light from the actual light from the film camera, the cinema camera, to beam at the Doctor's heart, so he can use the power of the regeneration to make the Mr. Rigading more basically look more like a movie style characters, like the live action movie animation characters that we see today from like Sonic the Hedgehog, etc. And he kind of did look similar to that sort of animation that we've been seeing seeing in films lately with Sonic the Hedgehog. For a moment, he looked like that, and then he went back to 2D as soon as he saw the sunlight from the sky, which eventually turned him back. But then he was just pulled up to space, where he would just disappear. So that was a really cool moment. And also, there was a point where I thought, could he would have Lux have ended up having like power of? Could he have had like the power to be able to regenerate? Can you imagine if this cartoon was able to regenerate? That would have been scary to see that. I mean, for a god to regenerate, imagine if it did happen. That would make things worse for the Doctor if that happened. So luckily, he did not use that edge. So the Doctor was lucky there that he didn't use it. But if he did, that would have really made things a little bit more problematic for him. But nevertheless, the Doctor was able to get him out of this. And then, of course, caretaker of the film, he destroyed the films. Probably blew himself up by destroying those films in the storage room, which means those films are now lost forever. Basically, like the missing episodes of Doctor Who, pretty much. Like some of them are missing. Nearly pretty much all the cinema films are lost forever now that you blow them up. So you could look at it as a way of paying homage to how the old BBC junked some films in the past. Maybe that was a nod to that, maybe. But yeah, it was a really powerful story. I have to agree that, yeah, it definitely was a 10 out of 10 story. I mean, they weren't lying. These journalists were not lying about this story being much better than the first episode. They said it was going to be a 10 out of 10 story, and I think a lot of Doctor Who fans are going to rate it 10 out of 10 because of how Gatwa's performance was talking to a cartoon, and the way that the cartoon, they brought this cartoon character villain into this story that was very unique because it's never been done, and the fact that the Doctor gets turned into a cartoon for a brief moment and put into the cinema, and then he finally realizes, he's starting to realize that maybe some of his adventures were considered a TV show the entire time, which I'm starting to believe that's gonna in the back of his mind all the rest of the year and even into the future. Hopefully he's going to get himself out of that situation eventually. I feel like this is going to be the year where the Doctor will finally get himself out, sort of land of fiction or whatever this fiction world is that he's in. Hopefully he'll get himself out of it and he'll finally be able to be back in the real world again, and then we'll find out who the main cause of it was. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed it. And also the fact that Belinda was really enjoying the fact that she was in that yellow dress, and obviously the Doctor's costume for this story very similar to the Abbey Road costume, even though it's slightly different from what we saw in the whole Devil's Cord story which of course he dressed up to take on the Maestro. And it's interesting because this god does pay homage to the Toymaker and Maestro, who were the two previous gods the Doctor had defeated. So this was obviously another one of those. So I'm starting to think there'll be more to come, considering we've got this god. Chances are there's probably going to be more to come in maybe this series, maybe even next series. A lot of people have also I saw a video discussing about the idea that those recent rumors from the Daily Mirror, the Sun, about potential Doctor Who maybe getting hiatus was actually a publicity stunt to make us all believe that maybe to make us all believe that the Doctor was in a TV show and bringing this revelation out just so they could make everyone believe, the show may not get a third series, but actually it is because of all this dynamic that's going on. Maybe we'll have to see if it was a publicity stunt. Yeah, it's really interesting. Russell's finally brought to everyone's attention this idea that maybe the Doctor's in a TV show this entire time. Nobody really paid attention to it until now. Yeah, I'm starting to think, there's definitely some added weight to this discussion. And I would love to hear the conversation. How do you feel about this whole the Doctor's in a TV show theory, and how you feel the Doctor's going to get himself out of it? Is it going to be during the finale, which I feel like it will be? I think May 24th is going to have a key part to how he gets himself out of the real world, because I feel like that story is going to kick off a series of events that finally bring him back to the real world, and then eventually that will end that whole TV show saga, and then we'll eventually move on to bigger things. But we do have Rosa Allen Ellis, who's going to be guest starring in the story, the Death Woman, obviously. From the trailer we've seen, I'm starting to believe might be seeing a villain we haven't seen since 2009. One villain in particular that I think would fit this story very well, and hopefully they're coming back. We had a villain back in 2009 in an episode you may have seen. I'm sure a lot of you are new to Doctor Who fans. You might want to watch this story. I'm talking about The Waters of Mars, the David Tennant story, because in that story, a situation happens with the pipes in the water where they drink the water. They eventually become these people where they're having water coming out of their mouths, their faces are broken up, and eventually they're spitting water. They are known as. I'm starting to believe we might be seeing these creatures again, considering the fact final scene in that trailer shows what appears. What I'm starting to believe is showing a little bit of water. This is the flood coming back. I also, and more importantly, I hope you have an amazing Easter, or however you Doctor Who fans are going to be spending your Easter, whether and if you're having loads of chocolate or even planning to buy some chocolate, buy yourself some chocolate, enjoy yourselves. We'll definitely have some news videos coming out during the week with the overnight figures for Lux, official figures for Robot Revolution, and then of course next Saturday we'll review the Well. Enjoy the rest of your Easter weekend, and I'll see you all.